Hello, my name is Ron Neville and I work with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency as an area survey biologist, and I'd like to provide a brief overview of emerald ash borer, what to look for, and a little status update of EAB in Nova Scotia. This is an image of ash trees happens to be from Ohio. However, this could really be any urban ash forest in a number of cities throughout North America. This is the classic before picture. This picture was taken in the summer of 2006, and just 3 short years later, there's you can see the significant mortality. This is again in the summer. Trees are virtually dead at this point, just after 3 years later. Emerald ash borer, it's a significant pest of ash trees. It infests all species of North American ash, healthy or stressed trees, and from nursery stock size to mature trees. Infested trees will die within 1 to 4 years typically, and significantly over 99% of ash trees are killed within 6 to 10 years of EAB arriving in an area or in a stand, if no management activities take place. The cost of removing and replacing ash trees in Canada and Canadian communities is extremely high. It's estimated to be $2 billion over the next 30 years. And it's important to note that the loss of ash has not only high cost, but also has significant cultural impacts, with black ash in particular being highly favored by First Nations for basket making and a significant part of First Nations culture. And the ecological impacts of losing ash on the landscape affects other species. Researchers shown that at least 44 other plant-eating species depend on ash within an ecosystem to survive. When ash dies in an area, it creates gaps, and in many cases, the areas where ash had been growing are then populated by invasive plants that come in and prevent the new forests from growing. The life cycle of EAB can be 1 or 2 years, depending on the tree health and the climate. So in colder climates, EAB will take 2 years to develop. And the same goes for in healthier trees. Early infestations, EAB will generally take longer to develop, and more of the population will take 2 years. In warmer areas and in trees further in decline, life cycle will be more typically 1 year. So adults emerge from June to July from infested trees and foliage feed for about 2 weeks before mating and laying about 60 eggs on the bark or in crevices under the bark. The eggs will then hatch after about 2 weeks, and larvae will enter the tree through the bark and start feeding on the phloem and making a serpentine gallery underneath the bark. Eventually, with significant feeding in the phloem of the tree would be girdled and eventually die. The girdling prevents the flow of nutrients and water within the tree. From October to May, the EAB will be overwintering as a larva or a prepupal larva, depending on whether it's in a 1 or 2 year life cycle. And later in the spring, it'll pupate and begin the transformation from larva to adult, and it does this between the bark and the sapwood. And then in July to June, adults emerge through D-shaped exit holes in the bark and are strong flyers and can spread naturally a few kilometers every year. In Canada, we have a regulated area for the emerald ash borer, and as it's present in 5 Canadian provinces, in Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and in Nova Scotia, in particular in the Bedford area. This is a map that shows the surveillance for emerald ash borer from 2019. The surveillance for EAB in 2020 was quite similar. However, the data is not quite yet finalized for mapping purposes. This map shows EAB trapping by CFIA in green triangles and EAB trapping with partners in the blue diamonds. All areas outside of the HRM were negative in 2019 and also again in 2020. However, in 2019, there was a number of detections around the Bedford Basin, EAB having been first discovered in the Bedford area in 2018, in the fall of 2018. Trapping then took place again in 2019 and again in 2020. Reports just from this last year show, in addition to EAB being distributed around the Bedford Basin, also some reports of EAB in the Fall River area. So what do you look for when you're looking for signs and symptoms of EAB? EAB is an invasive beetle, belongs to a group called the metallic wood borers, and has a metallic green or coppery color on its wing covers, and then on the underside it's a bright emeraldine green color. The larva is a segmented larva that is quite flat and has its segments kind of look like little bells, the shapes of bells. The first thing to look for early infestation of EAB is to look for signs of woodpecker feeding. Woodpeckers are able to discover populations of EAB earlier than we can, and earlier we can with trapping or visually. They will flick off pieces of bark, which is sometimes called blonding. So they'll flick off pieces of bark looking for larvae within the tree, and then start excavating holes through the bark and into the tree. This is a picture from the Bedford area where woodpeckers have been feeding on larvae, and they've dug through the bark and have begun to start feeding on areas. There's also some cracking in this tree as well, some cracking in the bark as well. Another symptom to look for EAB attack is crown thinning. This is a progression of an ash tree in the Moncton, New Brunswick area. And back in 2009, it looked quite healthy. And again in 2015, the crown started to look a bit thinner and more chlorotic. And then in 2019, there's significant dieback. And at this point in 2019, when EAB was first confirmed in Moncton, there was a significant an obvious sign of EAB throughout that tree. So in addition to woodpecker activity and thinning crowns, we're also focusing on cracks in the bark. And this is an example of an ash from, this is in Bedford, with a crack in the bark. And when we remove the bark in this area where it's cracked, if EAB is the cause, then we'll see larval galleries. And the larval gallery for EAB starts off quite small and does a serpentine zigzag. And as the larva grows and develops, the tunneling in the gallery becomes wider as the larva matures, and then the larva will it'll develop and pupate and then emerge from the tree as an adult. When trees are early attacked, there may just be a few of these galleries on the tree, but after the tree gets infested for several years, you'll see multiple galleries all around the trunk of the tree when you remove the bark, and then eventually there's so many larvae that they're bumping into each other and you don't see this serpentine back and forth gallery. When EAB's finished developing, it emerges through the trunk or through the branches of the tree through a D-shaped exit hole, and these are challenging to find early infestations, but when a tree's been infested for a few years, they're more easily found, and so this would be a sign or symptom to that would be lesser likely to find early attack. Epicormic shoots or branching that comes out of the bole of the tree is another sign of EAB infestation. It can also be caused by other factors as well. For example, sometimes street trees will be hit by a plow or hit by someone mowing the grass or things like that, and that can cause damage to the trunk. And sometimes epicormic shoots will come out. But if you see a tree that has declining crown, has epicormic shoots, has some woodpecker feeding, then those are all indications, or those are all triggers to take a closer look and see if you can see signs of bark cracks or galleries or exit holes. And these are some pictures showing some of that in this case in New Brunswick. This tree has a small diameter tree, has some epicormic branching coming out of the bottom. It also has a very thin crown. And on closer examination, there's some galleries that are present. This is a tree that had a crack. The crack was, the bark around the crack was removed, and then that exposed a gallery underneath that was characteristic of EAB. If you see any signs of EAB or you're concerned about your ash trees and you're seeing any of these symptoms, please contact your local CFIA office and report the finds, take some pictures, and we can follow up with you and provide you some feedback. Thanks very much.